us today on Manzanita's Gold Country Oral History is the pastor of Vine and Branch Fellowship in Angels Camp, California, Chris Muetterties. Welcome, Chris. It is good to have you with us today.
Nice to be here.
So, were you born in Calaveras?
No, I was not born in Calaveras County. In 1968, my family was coming up here on vacation in a cabin up in Blue Lake Springs.
Oh.
And my dad found himself unemployed from General Motors in 1970 and decided to move his family here. And so I was 4 years old when we moved here.
Oh, so you've been here basically all your life then. Well,
Yeah.
tell me some about the family history after coming to Calaveras.
Well, my dad worked for Ken Emerson when he first got here, and my mom was an RN at the Bret Harte Hospital,
Oh, okay.
and she worked there. As a child, my mom would work nights, and my dad sometimes was on big projects out of the area, so we would sleep in my sister and I would sleep in the nurses' housing there
Oh,
behind Bret Harte.
oh, wow. Oh,
Yeah.
that was behind Bret Harte.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep. So all that kind of history.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then where did things go from there?
I would say like 72 or 73, my dad opened up his own real estate office.
Oh, okay.
And he originally had worked for a fellow named Frank Bennett in Arnold, selling real estate, and then he got his broker's license and opened up his own office.
Oh,
And that first office is located where Mountain Christian Fellowship is located today, just outside of Forest Meadows.
okay. Yeah, that butts up right up to the
Yeah.
Forest Meadows.
Yeah, it was before Forest Meadows existed.
So what year would this be, probably?
I would say probably about 73,
Oh, okay.
74, somewhere in that range. Yeah, so my family's been in real estate here for a long time.
Mhm.
My mom, my dad, my brother, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, and now my two nieces.
Awesome. So did you go the path of real estate?
No,
No.
never, always knew I would never go into real estate.
Was it your thing?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
What did you do?
Well, I've done a few things over the years. I worked for UPS for a period of time, for about 9 years. And then in 1999, I started a cleaning and restoration company.
Oh,
And that's what I did for 23 years.
okay.
Until recently, I sold that to my youngest son
Oh, okay.
and started this job at the church.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you go from carpet man to minister man?
Well, I would say the two operated simultaneously.
Okay, and how?
I would say that I've always been dual vocational,
Mhm.
and I was just the way I paid for my ministry was to work in my cleaning business. So when I started my business, I kind of made a deal with the Lord, and I just said that I would worry about serving Him, whatever needed to be done, and I would let Him worry about my business.
Mhm.
And so that was quite a partnership for 23 years.
Oh, okay.
He was always very good to me in that partnership.
Okay. Now, I know you started out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as a youth minister.
Well, actually, the first job I had at the church was janitor.
Oh, okay.
That was the first way I served the church.
And what church or different churches?
Foothill Community Church.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to this day, I still think it was the most important job I've done.
Yeah.
There's something about serving the church and serving others where you can't be seen and you can't be thanked. I think it's very valuable. So yeah, that was my first role, and I've done lots of different roles. My wife and I ran the Awana program.
Oh, okay.
We did that for years and years. In fact, it got big. There was over 100 kids in the program
Was that at the same
at
facility?
Foothill. Yeah. And I've run men's ministry. I've run Mary Martha's and delivered food to community members who are in the middle of crisis.
Mhm.
You know, you have that bad car accident or somebody gets that cancer diagnosis. We've fed lots of people that way. And then I taught Bible study to 7th and 8th graders at CFLC, Christian Family Learning Center,
Okay.
for a couple years. And And then I'm trying to think of when the years just start to run together.
Yeah.
But at one point, I got tapped on the shoulder and asked if I would be the youth pastor.
Mhm.
And so I did that. And that's probably when I came in most contact with you and your family, because Aaron, your son, helped me with the worship band for the youth. Yeah.
And I know, as a personal testimony, you were a huge blessing to our family.
Oh, well, thank
Uh,
you.
we hit on hard times there, and you had such a heart for those in need, even in your kids level in your youth group. And
Yeah.
y'all made some exciting field trips too, didn't you, with the youth?
Yeah. Yeah. What happened was actually the youth pastor before me was Dusty Bach.
Okay.
And he was planning on taking the kids down to Mexico to build houses, a very traditional kind of mission trip. But at that time, the border became pretty unsafe for crossing. And the State Department actually said, don't do it. So they canceled that trip. And what happened was a lady at the church had put together an opportunity for us to go to San Diego. We camped um, in tents. They rented tents for us, and we camped there, and just outside in El Cajon. And every day we went and worked with African refugees that had been brought over.
Oh,
We did VBS for them, and we did all this kind of stuff for them. And one night we got invited to go to downtown San Diego with the Rock Church and do homeless ministry with them. And we got there, and there was 200 tacos, and we each took a bag of say 20 or 30 tacos, and we walked around in groups of 3 or 4, and we gave out tacos to homeless people. And at this point in my life, I saw homeless people as people that just needed to get a job. In fact, I've probably told quite a few to get a job. In fact, I probably went as far as maybe as to give them an application to McDonald's as I walked past them.
yeah.
And so I'm out on the street, and I see this man, and I offer him a taco. And he asked me if I'd like to sit down with him. And he actually, he's on the ground on a blanket, and he actually opened up the blanket a little bit bigger so I could sit on his blanket. To be honest with you, it kind of felt like, hey, sit down in my living room as we're sitting here. And so he's talking, and he makes mention of going to the VA that day. And I go, are you a veteran? Yes, I served in Vietnam. And at that point, a buddy of his walked up, and he goes, oh, Tom did too. Tom served in Vietnam also. So we're talking for a little bit longer, and he says to me, could we play a song for you? Tom got out his guitar, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely, play a song. Well, they sang to me Amazing Grace, all 4 verses. All- And all I could do, honestly, is sit there and tears in my eyes. It was so beautiful. And so now I guess I'm confronted with this mindset I have about homelessness, about who I think that they are, and how inconvenient they are for me. And I'm also struck with the fact that the minute I sat down on that blanket, I became invisible to all the people who were walking by. So up to that point, San Diego is a pretty fairly city. So you walk past people, they look at you, they nod, they say hello, you get greeted. But the moment I sat down, I became invisible. They wouldn't look at me anymore. So in their eyes, I was just another homeless person. And I guess in that moment, I've kind of felt like what it is to be them. So we're walking back to the car, and we meet up with the entire team. And while we're standing there, this guy walks up, and I'm watching him for a while, and he seems agitated. I'm actually concerned about him, so I'm watching him. And he walks up and he gives us a flyer. The flyer is an artist's rendition of a woman, and it's his sister that he's looking for, and she had been missing since she was 12 years old from Texas. And it's 15 years later, so she's 27 years old. And they've gotten some indications that she's on the streets in San Diego, and they're asking us, have you seen her? This is what we think she might look like today. And so there's just all this brokenness, and I'm just like overwhelmed with, and my heart breaks for this guy. I mean, he must have been like 5 or 6 years old when his sister went missing. So we get done, and the back up for a second, but one of the things was the 2 nights before I'd been complaining about being cold. We were staying in a screened in cabin, but the blanket I brought wasn't very effective. It was a little too small. And so either my shoulders were cold or my feet were cold. I had to choose. And typically what would happen is about every 30 minutes I would wake up and adjust the blanket to warm up the area now that was now cold. And so we're walking back to our car, and earlier that day I had bought a blanket. And as we're walking back to the car, I look down on the ground and I see a homeless Santa Claus. It's this man, he's probably 70 years old. He's built like Santa, total white hair, long hair, and a big, huge white beard. And he is asleep on the sidewalk. And he is in the fetal position. His hands are tucked between his legs to stay warm, and his head is laying directly on the concrete. There's no cardboard underneath him. There's no blankets. There's no nothing. And in that moment, all I could think about is a scripture in the Bible that talks about Lazarus, the beggar, and the rich man who walks over him day after day. And in that moment, I know the Lord has let me know that I am the rich man, and this is Lazarus, the beggar. And I begin to weep. I begin to remember all the times I've been so judgmental about homeless people. And then I remembered, I have that blanket. So I run ahead of the group, I get into my car, I get that blanket out, and it was big because I was going to make sure I wasn't going to be cold, right? So it's like a king size bed blanket. And I go back, and this man, he's sound asleep. And I don't know about you, but I don't like to get startled when I'm asleep. So I'm like, well, how do I give it to him? And so I took that blanket, I folded it up like 3 times, so now it's like good and thick. And I just laid it over him like this, gently. And he opened up one eye and he whispered to me, "Thank you." And then he closed his eye again. And all I could think about was all the times I've walked into my child's bedroom before I go to sleep and tuck them in. And I realized that the Lord was allowing me to tuck in one of his children. And so that was the night that the Lord just really broke me about homeless people. So you asked me, this started with, I took the kids on some unusual adventures. So when I was given the job of homeless, or as the youth pastor, I did not want to take them down to Mexico to build houses because it was too easy for the kids to disconnect from that and say that's what happens in Mexico.
Mm.
So I decided that I was going to show them that it happens in our backyard. And so we would travel all over California doing homeless stuff. We would do it for a week at a time. We did a week in the Tenderloin. We did weeks in LA. We've done weeks in San Diego. But often we would go down to Stockton under the Crosstown Freeway and spend time with homeless people there.
I actually went one time.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
It's humbling.
Yeah. Can you
It's
go
humbling.
into that detail?
Yeah, so, here's the thing, and I want people to understand this. I, I never thought I could solve homelessness. And I always knew whether we gave somebody an ice cream or we gave somebody a hot dog or whatever, that I was not solving homelessness. But I wanted people who the world has forgotten to know that somebody cares for them. And I think all of us want that. I think all of us have a desire to be seen and to be heard and to know that someone cares about them. So what we would do is we would go down to Stockton, we would bring food, we would set up tables and chairs, big folding tables and chairs. We'd be able to seat like 40 or 50 people. We would set them up under the freeway, and the high schoolers' job was to talk to the homeless people and to hear their stories. And then the adults that would come, we would cook up the hot dogs and we'd get them all ready, and they would just line up and they would come through the line. But they would sit and talk. And from those conversations came important things. Some of the things that stand out to me was one of the men said to this young woman, Candace, he said, I wish the guy who had introduced me to marijuana in high school had just pulled out a gun and shot me in the head instead. My life would have been so much easier. Another time we had a young lady with us who had some level of being able to sign with deaf people. And we found a homeless woman there who was deaf. Now think about that. I mean, being homeless is really isolating. But to be homeless and deaf, how scary, how isolating.
Yes.
So this young lady sat for 2 hours and communicated with her. And that woman, she just had the greatest time talking with this young gal. But I have to tell you, I did all of that not for the homeless people in Stockton. I did all that to humble our teens. I did that because, let's be honest, a teenager's upset because they don't have the latest iPhone. Or their parents didn't let them go something, or their parents didn't buy them a car, or whatever it is. And so for them to hear and go down there, and I would always, so then what we would do is we would drive home, we'd pick up some pizzas, and then we would do debrief. We would stop at the mini mart in Farmington, and we'd set up all the chairs we had, and we'd sit in a circle and we would talk about, what did you hear? What did you hear? And I'd always say to them, do you think in high school their dream was to be addicted and homeless in Stockton? Like, your choices that you're making today could have lifelong impacts on your future. And that's what I was really trying to get across to them. The homeless people just got to benefit from
Yeah.
those tools that I used.
Yeah. Yeah. The time that I went, and this was probably a common thing you did, you also took clothes to these people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So what it is, once the church started to see what we were doing, they would bring us extra clothes. So, if it's wintertime and we've got coats, absolutely, let's take them. And boy, they absolutely loved them. And, the other thing too about me is there's a difference between somebody being homeless and somebody being a professional homeless. And because I've spent so many hours on the streets doing this, I know I'm a million miles away. And I want you to know, like, a professional homeless doesn't get a nickel from me. I have no interest in it. They're just working the system.
Yeah.
But when you're out there, so one year we went down there and we gave out, it was around Christmas time, it was probably a few days before Christmas. We gave out snowman soup. Have you ever had snowman soup?
Tell me about snowman soup.
So the homeless people, they're like, they would come running because we put up big signs, snowman soup. Snowman soup was pretty simple. It was hot chocolate with marshmallows, a Hershey's Kiss for the nose, and a candy cane hanging in it.
Oh.
And they just loved it because it was warm,
Uh,
and they loved it. But while we were there, I started asking the homeless people a question, and that was, what are your biggest concerns? I actually made a video about it
Oh,
because at Christmas time, what are our concerns, right? Am I going to have prime rib? Am I going to have turkey? Are my kids going to come to, what kind of gifts are my kids going to get? What's in my stocking? We're pretty self-focused. So I was curious, what were some of their concerns? And there was two that stood out with me. I remember it today. I worry about the cars coming off the overpass and running me over. My friend died last week that way. Now, I don't go to bed thinking about getting run over during the night. The other one was a woman and her two small children. I would say the kids were like 4 and 6 years old. And they had one more night in the shelter before they had to stay on the streets. I don't worry about those things. I take those things for granted. I sure don't worry about them at Christmas time. So, it's just, it was humbling. It was a really humbling season. To this day, I still have a heart for homeless people. Um, Often when I'm on vacation, we stop and do lunch with them, or I have a homeless friend of mine in San Luis Obispo, and every time my wife and I go, I always leave the room early one morning, and we sit and talk and have long conversations, and yeah, yeah.
back to the kids, the youth group, when you would come back and debrief and they would tell you what they saw, did you see their heart changing for the homeless? Did you see their opinions changing?
Yeah, yeah, you can't be around that and not be humbled by that. And so the fun thing about that is your problems get smaller. And so, when life is hard, I don't care who you are, life is hard. It's it's a great thing when your problems can become smaller.
Yeah.
And so if you spend some honest time with a homeless person, you'll find your problems get smaller. Now, with that being said, I have real strict rules about the homeless. I never give them money. I never cave to their quote unquote demands. So often when you're out on the streets, you'll get one who wants to come and kind of work you.
Okay.
You'll speak Christian lingo and they'll do this and that and God bless you and all that kind of stuff. And they're just angling.
Yeah.
They're just angling. And once they realize, first of all, that they're not going to get anywhere with that, but second of all, that you're just genuinely interested in them, they let go of all of those things and they just have real conversation. Yeah. And they are incredibly lonely. Homeless people are. Yeah.
Now, you took the youth to the LA area. Can you
Yeah.
go into that?
Yeah. So the LA has a organization now they're called the Dream Center.
Oh, okay.
The Dream Center was started by a guy named Matthew Barnett. He came 30 years ago to LA to start church at the Angelus Temple. It was an existing church. And when he got there, it's a church that seats like probably 1,000 people, but it was only a church of 30 people. And 6 months after he started, it was down to 30 people. So he kind of cried out to the Lord and said, Lord, what do you want me to do? I thought you wanted me to come here. I thought you wanted me to start this church. And the Lord kind of spoke into his life and said, if you want to do church here, it's not going to look like church. And it's going to be open 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. So what he did is he was in Echo Park, which was a pretty rough neighborhood. He started knocking on doors. The very first door, an older woman answered the door and he said, ma'am, do you need anything? My name is Pastor Barnett and I'd like to help you. Do you need anything? And she said, I need my front door painted. So he went down, bought paint, and painted her door. And then he knocked on the next door. She needed groceries. So we went and bought groceries. And that birthed the Dream Center. And the Dream Center is a 200-bed men's recovery program. They own a city block. They bought a hospital and all the outbuildings that are there. And they are truly trying to solve homelessness. And so they'll go out on the streets and they'll meet a guy and they'll offer him a free apartment, a place to stay. And as long as they're moving forward, as long as they're getting their GED or their driver's license, or they're taking job training, they have that place to stay. And the other thing they have to do, they have to go to church twice a week, but they're also provided 3 meals a day.
Wow.
And they have a USDA food bank there. They feed 40,000 people a month. They have a foster prevention program where the county of Los Angeles will call and say, we have this family over here in, say, Watts, and they're about ready to lose their children to the system because their kids' mattresses are on the floors or they don't have dressers, and the state requires those things. So they go right into that home, they bring them food, they bring them toiletries, they bring them new beds, they bring them dressers, and they keep those families together so they're not broken up and put into the foster care system. So one of the things I learned from Matthew Barnett is, instead of a church, typically the mindset of a church is, we'll start this ministry and people will come because of it. So, churches typically have, Sunday morning service. They have a men's group, they have a women's group, they have small groups in homes, they have Sunday school, they have youth groups. These are all typically what people see as what churches do. But Matthew Barnett says, no, find a need and fill it. That's a very different process. So instead of just creating something and hoping that people come, kind of like that Field of Dreams movie, if you build it, they will come. That's Hollywood. But that's not necessarily reality of a church. So that's every ministry that was down there came because they found a need and they wanted to fill it. So that has played an important role for me. So because a lot of people know that I'm always did a lot of homeless stuff, I don't know, they always thought I was doing it for the homeless. They didn't understand I was actually doing it for the kids. That was my motivation. But that mindset, when I took over the church and the job as the pastor at Vine and Branch Fellowship, which was known as Foothill Community Church for many years, my goal has been, let's find the need and fill it. Let's really find out. And we would have meeting after meetings is, what does our community need? Who are the hurting demographics of Calaveras County? And up till a few years ago, like, homelessness was pretty minor. In fact, a lot of people, it's why we went to Stockton, because we didn't have them here like that. Now, obviously, like the rest of California, everywhere there's homeless, but still, it's not our big demographic. Let's be honest, we don't really have services here in Calaveras County and so it's not very sustainable for them to be here. They can go to Stockton, they go to Sacramento, they can get much better services there. So what is the demographic for us? And I think what's really been put on our heart is the plight of single moms, how difficult it is. Especially that single mom who's working. Because what happens when she goes to work is she loses a lot of the state perks. And whatever, these gals, these single moms who are working, yeah, they get some perks, they get some help with childcare and all that kind of stuff, but it's difficult. And one of the elders at our church, who's very successful in life, mentioned that when his daughter got divorced, all of his resources couldn't help her through the process. And so we started a ministry, we call it GAP, God Answers Prayers. But what it is we really want to stand in the gap for single moms and single dads who are raising kids and help them the best we can. And that's such a fine line because we don't want to be a handout. And I'll be honest with you, I feel like that's why we have so much homelessness here in California, is because there's so much of a handout from the government. We want to be a hand up. We want to offer somebody encouragement and help them strive for more.
Yeah.
Go back to school, pursue better jobs, all those types of things. And how can we partner with you in that? Well, there's lots of different ways. Sometimes it's just an encouragement. Sometimes it's a meal we do on family nights. If a single parent comes, like, we don't charge them for food. That helps them out a little bit financially. We have a tree in our lobby right now, and there's probably been 150 gift tags on that tree. It's all for single parents. So they could go on our website, or you could, if you knew somebody, you could go on our website and you could put the needs out there, and we'll put a gift tag out, and the congregation's just been taking those left and right and filling those needs, and these moms have been dads. There's a couple single dads on there. They've been receiving things like gift cards and winter coats for their kids and shoes and all the necessities. This past Sunday, we invited about 8 or 10 single moms who we've been working with over this past year. We did a Christmas party for them.
Oh.
And they got to come, they got to drop off their kids at the church. We had 6 adults there. We cooked the kids food. We had crafts for them to do, and we had games for them to play. We had movies for them to watch. And then the moms got invited over to a really nice home over in Greenhorn Creek, and they had a nice meal, and they got their nails done, and
Oh, how lovely.
they had Christmas gifts to open
Oh,
up.
that's awesome.
And one of the moms, when it was over, she said, I'm a single mom of 3 kids. I was not expecting a Christmas gift this year, and to come here and receive these beautiful gifts and have a few hours away from my kids and just be able to laugh and enjoy this nice home, and it was really encouraging.
Another ministry you have there at the church is for grieving mothers.
Yeah.
And was that birth, am I mistaken, was that birth because one of the youth in your class that had passed?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So, my wife and I, we have 3 children of our own,
Mhm.
but we have many children of our hearts. Aaron is one, your son. And one of them, her name was Rachel. She lived in Sonora, and she found her way over to youth group, and she became a part of our family. And she spent hundreds and hundreds of hours in our home. And she was just another sibling in the house. Sometimes she stayed the night and never knew when she was going to show up, and never knew how much she was going to eat. And she was just like the rest of our kids. And one night, I get awoken by my youngest. He's like, "Dad, wake up, wake up." And I'm like in deep sleep, and I'm not waking up. And finally he says to me, "Dad, get up. Rachel's dead." So now I'm wide awake. So Rachel and some co-workers from the Black Oak Casino in like probably June, a little over 5 years ago. We had had a really big winter, and they wanted to go rafting with inner tubes at Knight's Ferry down 108. And her parents begged her not to do it. They felt that it was too dangerous with the high flow of the rivers on the snow runoff that was going. And they got to Knight's Ferry, and as they were getting into the water, a, a seasoned river guy told them, "Do not do this. Your tubes are not, don't tie your tubes together. Your tubes aren't meant for this. They're not, these are pool tubes. These are not meant for this." And shortly after getting in that water, she was drowned and had died. And she died with a life vest on. Um, that wrecked us as a family. Um, Obviously, within probably 24 hours, I was at her parents' house. What's interesting is I didn't know her parents very well. Um, this her involvement with our youth group was kind of on her own volition, and she was driving her car. Their parents didn't come to our church, and that's where my relationship with the parents really grew. And through that process, and through the process of others in our community, um, I began to realize that one of our really hurting demographics are parents who have lost a child. And it's a very unique grief. It's a very debilitating grief. It's one that you and I don't know. And it's one that's offensive if we think we know what they're going through. One of the things, Diana, this is Rachel's mom, that I would keep saying to her is that God was not putting her through all that pain to just make her suffer, that one day he would use it. Well, she found in her grief process, she found a book for grieving moms. And she went through like an online thing with the author, and she met a group of moms all over the United States, and they would meet and have retreats, and she really found some healing in that. And so Diana came to Vine and Branch Fellowship and started a grieving moms group. And I think there was 11 moms who went through the first round of it. And then this past October, we invited the author to come.
Oh,
And we hosted a one-day retreat for grieving moms in our community, and 20 grieving moms came. So it was, yeah, again, find a need and fill it. Yeah, that's a real unique need.
what would Rachel say?
I think she'd be super proud of her mom for doing that, and be able to work past that debilitating grief. And it's not that she doesn't grieve. I mean, she misses her daughter every day. Um, and like Rachel left a huge impact on me, because Rachel never left bad relationships undone. So if she knew you and her had like a conflict, that girl couldn't rest until that relationship was healed.
Yeah.
And that she had tried everything she could possibly do to restore that. And it's such an honor to her legacy. Yeah,
You took part in her service.
I did.
Yes, I remember that. I was there.
Yeah,
And if I remember right, she liked sunflowers. Was it
that's
sunflowers?
right. That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sunflowers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is so wonderful. Well, also at the church, you had a wonderful vacation Bible school this year. It was awesome, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. We are excited to have a lot of kids around.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that was our fourth one. And, we had 80 some kids there.
Wasn't there a motorcycle on stage?
Oh yeah, there was a dirt bike.
A dirt-
It was about extreme sports, so there was a dirt bike up on the stage, and
Oh,
we let the kids just have a lot of fun in that sanctuary. We're very blessed to have a really amazing mom. Her name is Stephanie Kopp, and um, VBS is her passion and her heart, and uh, I. It would be horrible if I did it.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
would be horrible if I did it. But luckily, she's in charge, and she does an amazing job with it.
When I walked in that sanctuary, I mean, it made me want to be a kid. It was
Yes.
amazing.
Yeah. We had laser lights going and beach balls flying around,
Yes.
and
Wasn't there some swimming little pools or something around?
oh yeah, there was swimming pools and a tent and kayaks, and that place was just crazy.
Yes, a nice sized sanctuary.
Yes. Yeah.
That is awesome. Well, there's something else that's impressive about the church, and while we're on your part about Vine and Branch, the baptism. Can you,
Baptism.
can you tell us about what's on stage?
Well,
Where
now
do
see, I did not start baptism.
okay, tell me all about it.
Well,
It
baptism
started in
is,
the tent, actually, right?
it did, it did. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, baptism is a key integral part of scriptures. It goes all the way back to the Old Testament. And then we see in the New Testament, we see the birth of John the Baptist, and he starts calling people to repentance and baptism. But then we also see him baptize Jesus.
Mhm.
And that's the baptism that we're left with today. That baptism that represents us dying to our old self and our old way of life, and publicly claiming who Jesus Christ is in our life, that he's Lord and Savior, that we want to die to our old ways and walk in his ways. Baptism does not save us. It is our faith in Jesus Christ that promises us eternal life. But it is a big part of our walk, and it is a public display of an inward faith. Um, so we've been seeing a lot of baptisms. We've been seeing a lot of baptisms, and it's been pretty powerful. And with every baptism comes a story of how somebody got to that church or got to that place where they want to be baptized. Um, I would say we've probably done 30 baptisms this year alone. Yeah.
And can you give us a little detail about where you baptized?
Oh, yeah. Well, in pure Calaveras County fashion, we baptize in a horse trough,
That is
in
awesome.
a feeder trough, the galvanized oval feeder troughs. We don't have a regular baptismal, but we just put it on the stage, and when people feel that calling of the Lord to be baptized, we just put them in.
I just think it's so amazing. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Like I said, Calaveras County.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So it was last Christmas. Um, I had a certain burden, and I came to church, and there were, I don't know, 100 gift boxes
That was a
across
fun
the
morning.
stage.
Yeah.
Can you go into those gift boxes?
Oh boy. Um, Jesus Christ gives us a beautiful gift.
Mhm.
And he went on the cross and he was tortured horribly. And then he died on that cross so that we can walk in freedom. And so often we carry burdens. And so as I was getting ready for that Advent season last year, I wanted to do a gift exchange. And so what I did is I asked people to come up to a table that had all kinds of different burdens that one might be carrying: worry, anger, alcohol, whatever it is that you're carrying. And I ask you to take it up and leave it on the cross and bring home this gift that the Lord's given us. And so there are all these square gift boxes up there, and And it was just a symbol of what Jesus did on the cross for us so that we could have things like hope and peace and forgiveness and joy in our lives. But often our burdens rob us of those things. And so what's funny about it is that so I thought this through, I got everything ready to go. And that morning, I started doubting that it would be effective, that it would be well received. So I think there was 100 boxes up there. So at the last minute, I decided to do it. So I'm frantically folding all these boxes together because they're laying flat, and I put them out. And so I get to the end of my sermon and I explain what it is I want to do. And I'm thinking to myself, no one's going to come forward. The doubt is still in my ear. I think no one's going to come forward. And the next thing I know, there's like a mad dash. And all those boxes were just gone. It was beautiful.
Chris, my box is still on my dresser a year later.
Yeah.
And yes, there was something really troubling me for months. And it just gave me a peace, that symbol. And I found spiritual comfort. And through the year, sometimes I'd go to worry or something, and I'd look at that box. It's still, it's still helping me. So, but I don't have room for a lot of boxes in my house. So if you do it again this year, just let me know and I'll bring my box and I'll go.
I tend not to repeat myself very often, so
No,
it
that was
won't happen this year.
that was wonderful. That was wonderful. So, I think all of us hope one day as we stand before our Lord to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. And I just know in my heart you will hear that. You've done so much. You've you've done so much for the children, the youth, even the adults and the homeless. You've just you're an amazing person, and we appreciate you. I hope you know that. My final question for you today is, what is your vision and hope for the future of Calaveras County?
Well, that's a pretty big question. Um, you know, Jesus said he came for the sick, not for the well. And I hope one of my hopes for Calaveras County, there's plenty of them, but I think one of my hopes is that people recognize that church is for imperfect people. Um, if you went out drinking last night on Saturday, if you go out drinking on Saturday night, go to church. On Saturday night you found yourself and you've committed adultery, come to church. You got mad at your kids and yelled at your wife, come to church. Church is uh, church is a healing place. And in 1999, I'm 32 years old, and I've never really been to church before. And I walked in scared to death. Church is, if you weren't raised in the church, if you're not familiar with church, church is a scary place. Church can feel judgmental. Church can feel legalistic. So I walked in and I listened to hope for the first time. And it's powerful and it's healing and it offers families a place to be restored. I don't care what you've done. I don't care if you've murdered somebody. I don't care if you're suicidal. I don't care if you beat your spouse. I don't care if you've done all these things to whatever. I don't care how long you've been in prison. There's nothing that the blood of Jesus won't cover. There's no sin that can't be forgiven. All it takes is anybody who's coming to church, they're only 18 inches away from that. And that's the distance between standing and kneeling and humbling yourselves and just asking Jesus Christ for forgiveness. And so at Vine and Branch, you smell? Come to church. Because I got to tell you a secret. Before the Lord, we all smell. We're all sinners. We all fall short. If you think you're the biggest sinner in the building, come on in, because I know I'm the biggest one. And anybody's welcome. And so I want churches. I have to tell you, one of the most discouraging things to me was during COVID, when our governor said churches had to close down and no one cared. That broke my heart. And the reason it broke my heart is because then I knew in that moment that our churches were failing our communities. Because if the churches were doing what churches were called to do in Scripture, there's no way they would have allowed the government to shut down the churches, because it would have been too important to the local community. But instead, we were shut down and no one cared, no one noticed. And that's our fault. We failed. We have failed our communities. So my hope for Calaveras County is that our churches become integral to the physical and mental health of our community. I feel like it's super important. You know, right here, we're in San Andres right now. You got a great church here with San Andres Covenant, doing a great job. And I just want that everywhere. And what's interesting about that is, going back to the Dream Center, is the Dream Center did not get shut down because they were a USDA food bank. They were able to stay back open. But about 9 months in, when we got the new lockdown, the mayor of LA shut down the Dream Center. The outpour from the community was so great, within 12 hours, he had to lift the order. Because the phone rang so much at City Hall, the people screamed so loudly that you can't shut down the Dream Center. They're too important to us. And that's the kind of church I want to be in, this community. I don't know that we can solve homelessness, but we can sure help single moms. We can sure walk alongside broken, grieving mothers and fathers. And we can sure try our best to fill any other need we can fill.
Thank you for being with us today, Chris.
So thank you.